Greetings and welcome back. We are going to continue working on our Viper model. Now the next thing I want to take a look at is this piece right here. It's kind of like the main housing part of the fuselage that contains the engines. And if I click back a few images, you can see a really nice breakaway of just this piece and kind of what it does. So you can see it's kind of incomplete here. The modeler still hadn't yet closed this off, but what we're going to be focusing on is this great big piece that kind of wraps around. The wing will kind of plug generally somewhere in here. And this is how we're going to handle it. We're just going to create this great big kind of floating piece, and then we'll move on from there. So let me go ahead and slide this over. Now let's start off in our left view. So I'll hit Control 3 on the number pad as soon as I put focus on Blender, because then it works a lot better. I'm going to ignore this piece for now. This would be really easy to create from some of the geometry you already have, so for the time being I'm not going to stress over that at all. Let's begin by bringing in a new plane. So I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode, and actually I want to do this back here. I'm going to right click over here in space somewhere. Now for me that moves the 3D cursor. For you it might still be the left mouse button, depending on whether or not you actually followed along with changing your Blender settings in the same manner that I did in the first video. But let's go to Add Mesh and bring in a plane. Now you'll notice that actually brought in two planes. That's because since we added in a new mesh while we were in edit mode, it added this mesh as a part of our existing polygon object, and so our mirror modifier is being applied as well, which is extremely convenient for us. Now, that said, let's do a couple of things. Let's hit Control Tab E for edges. Let me grab this internal edge, slide this up just a little bit. That's just so that when I jump over here into the side view, I can tell the difference between the top and the bottom. I'm also going to jump over to the front view real quick, and you can see how this could just be a constant shape that just goes all the way through, and that's the way I want to handle it, just to keep things nice and easy for us. So let's grab... let's hit Control Tab V for vertices, and I'm just going to hit B and draw a marquee box around all of that, and I'll slide these in, and as soon as I do they're going to meet in the middle, which is exactly what I want. Now it looks like that left behind a vertex, and I'm not going to stress that too much. We'll just go ahead and pull these together, and I'll grab this little straggler vertex and pull it over like so. We have so few vertices that I'm really not going to get too worried about whether one gets a little out of whack. So we'll pull this over. Let's jump over to, let's start off in the side view here. And it's going to be a little hard to tell the inside from the outside, so let's make sure we differentiate those. I'm going to pull these vertices forward, these vertices back. That way we can tell what's on the inside, what's on the outside. Let's go back over to the side view. And this is actually a pretty good position for this first vertex. We'll take the second one and put it right about here. Now let's hit Z so that we can see all of our other vertices, and let's see, that will pull down to about here. These both need to come really far forward. So let's pull this up like so, and this up like so. And if you were to take a look at this in the viewport, here's kind of what this looks like at the moment. Alright, let's jump over to the front view. It's still a little early to freak out too much about the shape, but we can slide this over. Let's take a look at a couple of different views real quick. I mean, that's right there on kind of that corner. So if I jump back over to a front view, it looks like it actually needs to be slid outward until it sits on that corner. I would like this vertex to kind of start to run along the outer edge of the shape, so this will kind of wrap up and around the fuselage as it goes out. This vertex we can slide upwards. Now just as a tip, or kind of an indication of where I'm planning on going with this, I'm not going to be worried about the inside of the cockpit in this model. We're going to put a shader on the outside of the glass that will be kind of gold shaped, kind of like what you see here, and we'll just leave it at that. We're not going to worry about being able to see through. So if this piece of the fuselage actually just kind of protrudes through where the cockpit should be and where the pilot should be sitting, that's totally fine by us. Doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Okay, that said, let's hit Control R, and I'm going to add an edge right in the middle, so I'll just right click to end that. Get that kind of lined up like so. Let's add another one here on the outside. Click and pull that up like so. Now we can just kind of start cleaning up these vertices. And what I'm doing is defining this edge right along through here. So maybe something about like so. Let's jump over to the top view. And it's lining up pretty well. We could pull this forward a ways. and this looks like it kind of slants forward a little bit, so we'll pull that up. And we'll pull this up as well, and it doesn't look like that will end up going through where the cockpit is, so we can just kind of model to our heart's content whatever feels good. Now let's switch over to edges, so Control Tab and then E, of course, and I'll go back over to the front view. Let's hit E, and I'll just pull this out to about here, and we'll hit E one more time, and I'll pull this down to about here. Immediately jump back over to the top view again, and just kind of clean things up a little more, so Control Tab V. And that's looking pretty good. Actually, it's lining up really well. Now I'm just going to get over here into kind of a free view and rotate around this. See if we have any odd looking indentations. And I mean, we kind of do. We could just sort of pull this forward, keep things a little bit smooth. Let's take a look at the side view, hit Z. It looks to me like it would probably be in our best interest, at least for now, to do away with these faces here, right here. And it's just so that we don't get confused as to what this shape is doing when we're looking through the side view. It'll just be a little easier to figure out what's doing what. So let's jump over to the top view, and this is actually going as far in as it needs to. In fact, it's got a little bit of overage, which is great, but I'm actually going to slide this back just a hair, and that looks pretty good. Now let's jump over here back to our side view, and I'm going to pull this up to kind of get it to line up with where that edge is going. So we're just kind of interpolating from way back here now. Also, from this view, I'm not really a fan of what I'm seeing right in here. I may need a little more detail. In fact, I probably will if I want this to look really nice. So we can slide this back, slide this back, slide this back. Let's see how that differentiates from the top view. Not significantly. Nothing I'm going to freak out about. Now, if I rotate here around to the front, let's go ahead and I'll drop in one more edge right in here that I'll slide out a little bit. It does help the rounding, which is good. I don't really want to overdo it, but another couple of edges here and there are not going to be deal breakers, I don't think. Just give us a little more cleanliness in our detail, and let's go ahead and put one more in here as well. This is going to be kind of a major defining piece of the fuselage, so I don't really mind adding a few extra edges to get the rounding nice from various angles. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Let's go back over to the side view, and with those extra vertices, with that extra detail, we can start sliding these back to get this nicely lined up. Okay, and I'm going to hit Control R and drop in some detail here that I can use for some general rounding of the surface, which I'm sure that here in a moment I'm going to have to go into my perspective view and just kind of clean up a little bit. Also, even though this is an irregular front shape, it doesn't look like it's nicely sliced over from the side, I do want to straighten up these edges a little as I go. Let's take a look from the front view, and it looks like we could use probably all of these vertices and kind of push them out to get a little bit more rounding. We start to bleed off that rounding a little as we go through here, just so there's a nicer transition. And overall, that's not looking half bad. This looks like it could be pulled up a little bit. Let's take a look from the front view. And from the side view, I don't want to go up too far, but that's probably a little more like what it's actually doing, is this kind of upward slope. You kind of have to read a little bit of the specularity of the surface and be open to the idea that you might be misreading it and you may need to go back in later and make adjustments. That's the name of the game. Alright. And we can pull this down, pull this down. And actually what I think I'm going to do is straighten this up a little bit. for a little bit of added consistency. Okay, so that's definitely coming along and looking pretty nice. Now we will be wrapping this all the way around to the underside, but I'm going to start with the top first. So I'll say Control Tab E, hold down Alt, and we'll click on this edge here. And hit extrude, and I'm just going to pull this way back, like so. And this will be kind of like a mid-ground interpolation. So let's do a couple of things. I mean, I have been lining this up to the wings, but that is not going to necessarily be the best way to handle this if we are modeling this in a format you see here, where this is actually kind of a big open-ended capsule-like shape. Open-ended capsule. That doesn't make any sense at all, Zach. I mean, just so you know. Control Tab V for vertices. Let's grab... come on, Control Tab V. Thank you. It's all about putting focus on the app. So what I'm going to do is turn this into a relatively straight line that cuts straight across and ignores what the wing is doing. What the wing is doing here is going to be defined through an entirely separate piece of geometry that we are not going to stress our pretty little heads over at the moment. So let's go ahead and lift this up about like so, because I mean, you have to kind of interpolate in your head that this should be coming up and then curving over and leveling out somewhere back here. So that's the way I'm going to treat it. So we'll pull this back, and another way to kind of help us figure out where things should be placed and how far things should be positioned is to come back here, and what we want is for the shape that we originally had to meet this surface. The two have to kind of, you know, butt up against one another. So we can start by grabbing this vertex here, and we can slide this up a ways. We can grab this vertex and slide it up a ways. And we got to be really careful with how we do this, because we want that transition to happen pretty much right at the base of this. Now, we can do a little bit of tug of war. We can do a little bit back and forth, so to speak, where we can grab this edge and bring it down. We can grab these edges and bring them up. But we want to make sure that they do kind of, you know, meet up and touch one another. I am going to do something. This little floating vert here is down a little far, so I'm going to pull that back up like so, and I like that a lot better than what it was a second ago. We'll pull this up for now. Now, if things look a little weird in here, notice we skipped a lot of this room, so we're going to need to come back in there and add some detail, but right now I'm just kind of roughing in the shape, so I'm not too stressed about how that looks just yet. It's still a little early yet. Okay, so now I'm going to get out of wireframe view. Again, that's the Z key, if you don't remember. And we're going to zoom in. I'm going to grab these two vertices here, and we're going to slide these out to get them right along this edge. And we'll just kind of start turning these into nice transition vertices. So if these guys are kind of moving outward, these need to move out just a little bit too and start to take some of that. Okay, so now let's grab our edges again. So Control Tab E, Alt click on this one edge, and let's just hit E and extrude again. We'll pull this back to about here for now, which is right about where that opening is going to start. Let's hit Control 3. That is pretty close to where the opening is going to start, which is good for us. So Control Tab V for vertices, and I'll put this back here. We'll slide this guy back to about there. And you see I'm just kind of outlining that hole. This guy I can pull back to about there, and then maybe from about here up. As a matter of fact, if I just kind of pull these down just ever so slightly, I can get this guy right into that kind of corner, and that starts to line up pretty well. I may need to add another edge in here if I really need more rounding. We'll deal with that in a bit. Let me grab these verts, and I'm going to line them all up here along the top, and then make something close to a straight line. It won't be a perfectly straight line, but close. And we can kind of see, we got like the Galactica label here, which is a little slanted. That tells me that it's probably a good idea for me to slant this whole shape a little bit more than it is. So I'll do that kind of tentatively for now. Now you'll notice I stopped following along with the hole right about here. So what I'm going to do is, first off, let's kind of check and see what this looks like from back here. And let's hit Z. And see, that's already a little too high to be plausible, so we have to start going back to sort of tweaking things out. And let's also take a look from the front view, and oh yeah, see, you can already see there's a huge discrepancy here that we need to go ahead and start working our way around. Now, I don't necessarily want to follow this line, because again, that's where the wing is attaching, so I have to kind of interpolate in my head about how this should be kind of wrapped around. Now, you can just make out part of the Galactica logo right about here. I mean, I'm 99.99% sure that's what we're looking at. So if we had an edge right about there, I'm just going to call it right about in the A in the middle of Galactica, that's going to be where the outermost edge should be placed. And then if we look from the top, there's not a whole lot of tapering from that point on. So if I get this outermost edge lined up there, I should be pretty close to what this should look like in the front view. It's just, and it's actually there when you look at it directly from above. It's very close. It's just the problem is all in here. We just have a royal mess that we need to really, really take some time and smooth out. So I'll start pulling these out. Just getting some nice, smooth loops as we radiate outward. That's really what I'm chasing. It's just overall sense of smoothness. And those may need to just stay back here for now. I'll see very shortly, because those might become a little more visible when we make our next extrusion. And that can come out. Maybe this can go back in. That can go out, and then we can start straightening these edges up a little bit so we have nice smooth transitions. Maybe pull this down a ways. And so you can utilize some of this texturing where you see these gaps in the metal. Those can really help you figure out where stuff should go. So use whatever you have on hand to figure out where to put things. Alright, now let's come over and get out of wireframe view, and again, something else that you'll see me do a lot is just get out of edit mode altogether and click smooth and just see if any real serious problem areas just leap out at you. And right now it doesn't look half bad. So let's just keep jamming. I'm going to take a moment and sort of clean these edges up a little bit. Okay, looking very nice. Now, we're still kind of roughing in the shape, so let's jump back out of here, and I'm going to slide these straight back toward their original positions, because we did move them around a little bit in the front view. Now I'll make these fairly straight. Then we'll hit Control Tab, E for edge, hold down Alt, and click here. Actually, that doesn't grab everybody I want it to, so we'll just be a little... let me hit Control Space, and that's just going to hide away my gizmo for a moment, because it's getting on my nerves. And I just need these last few edges here. We'll hit Extrude and pull these back to right about there. Now, that done, let's rotate around like so. Actually, let me jump over to the top view. This will probably make things a whole lot easier to do it this way. Now, it looks like there is some tapering here that I need to pay close attention to. So let's hit Control Tab, V, and all of these look like they need to be brought in a ways. So Control Space to bring in our widget again, and slide this over, and slide this over, slide this over, etc. And then we can just start tapering this shape as well. And taper, taper. Okay, now back here, actually we have some kind of untapering we could do back here. And then pull this in a ways so that this can have a nice indentation to right about there. And I'm just going to see about kind of stacking these guys. Not necessarily right on top of one another, but bringing them in pretty close to see if that creates the effect that I'm looking for. And it's pretty close, at least from here. Now let's take a look from some other angles. Of course, it's got a little ways to go. Pull this up. Pull this up. And just kind of tuck that in. Now let's take a look from a perspective view. And, I mean, that may be an interesting way to get the shape started. Yeah, not sure I'm a big fan of exactly what that's doing there. But it's a start. I think what I'm going to do for now is just leave it like that, and I'll come back in a little later and take a look at cleaning it up. But I'm really not digging how the topology just kind of transitions into that sharp little turn. That does not make me happy. Now, something I can do alternatively. Let's see, if I undo and pull all this back, I'm just going to spam the undo key for a minute. I don't know how well this is going to work, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. Let's jump over to the side view and hit Z. Now, if I was to just nuke out, well, I could nuke that face, or I could try to use this vertex and then use this vertex. And I don't like that concave face there. That makes me very, very unhappy. So what I'd probably... Oh, sorry, I just thumped the microphone. Please forgive me. I smacked it accidentally. So let's hit Control, Tab, and Faces. I want this face. I'm going to hit X. And let's delete out that face. And then I'll hit Control, Tab, E, and grab you, and hit F. And we'll just turn that into a triangle. I think that'll work a lot better for us. Now, Control, Tab, V for Vertex. And we just kind of get these lined up closer to where they seem to want to go here. Alright, and I think that's already looking a bit better. Now if we jump over to the top view, of course there's some tapering that needs to be done, but we knew there would be. And we can place this here. We can pull this back. We can pull this back. We can go ahead and taper this in. Taper this in. Taper that in. Okay. Now let's take a look at this. I think overall I like what this is doing a lot better. Let's switch around to a rear view for a change. And, well, yeah, we can... I think that's going to end up being a lot closer, but we do need to add a lot more outward curvature, obviously, to the shape. So that's what I'd like to take a look at next. But it's getting there. It's definitely getting where I want it to be. So let's start with these two verts, and I'll just start here at the rear view. We can position these outward. Grab the next one, pull this out, about like so, and I'll just kind of bounce back and forth between the views until I find the one I want. Now that's right on the edge, so I can't really muck with that too much. As a matter of fact, I probably can't muck with any of these guys very much, so I'll leave those mostly alone, because they do make a nice little transition into that whole area, kind of as they are. What I need to do is grab that next row, and actually I'm going to end up needing more detail. I think that's the real crux here. Let's take a look at the outer edge. Yeah, that's still pretty forward, and I said somewhere about here would be about midway. Let's take a look from the front view, and that's not horrible. This is, however. But for not having really checked this against the back, it's lining up with where that hole is very nicely, all things considered. So that makes me kind of happy. So we can pull that out just a little bit. Now let's hit Control R and drop in an edge right about here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is just straighten this up. It doesn't necessarily have to be a perfectly straight line, but straighter than it is would be ideal. Clean it up a bit. Now let's go over to the top view, and I mean it looks okay from the top. In fact, if I stay over here, some of this could actually be brought in just a little bit further. So I think I'm fighting the back image just a little bit, but that's alright. I can just fight it. So if I jump back here to the back view, then we can see that we've got some vertices here that we can move outward, and whatever I just did I don't want to do. I want to grab these two verts. Okay, Blender thinks I'm trying to select, so let's click right on the arrows. We'll pull those out, pull this out. And just kind of rinse and repeat, grabbing each one of these verts and using them to expand the overall volume right here in this area. And that looks pretty good, and I think this guy can also come up. Now if we take a look at the side view, and this is something else we need to pay attention to, because really what we'd like to see happen here is for these two pieces to meet somewhere along this edge. And so right now this guy's a little bit high, and you can already see why. It's because I was grabbing the wrong edge as I was doing all of that. So I'm going to put all that back like a fool, and we need to focus on these vertices. So I'm going to kind of really sloppily pull these out for now, just to get them away from the rest of the shape. Then we'll switch over to the front and or back view. It almost doesn't matter which at the moment. And we'll place them from here, where I can kind of see where they should be. And maybe slide that out a little more. Okay, and clean that up a little bit. Okay, and now what that's led to, actually it's starting to line up pretty well up through here, which is good. We can pull that up a little, pull this up a little. We've got a little bit of an indentation we can clean up here, as well as here. Lift this up a little higher, clean this up. Actually, we could also slide this out a little ways, and those start to meet a little more nicely. Same here, we can pull this out, and those also start to meet up a little more nicely right there. So again, it's that kind of war between what your image planes tell you is going on and what actually looks nice when you drop it in. I will end up probably changing around the way we handle this this edge so that we can kind of solidify this top piece, and that should make a lot of what we're doing here a lot easier. I could also use a little more detail right in here. So let's hit Control R and drop in an edge, say right about here. And let's jump into the side view and hit Z, and we can already see that there's some smoothing that could take place all throughout. That's looking okay. There's kind of an interesting transition here that I need to clean up. You see how we get almost like a very shallow V shape here that I don't really want to see happening. Okay. And let's take a look from back here. I think overall that's coming along pretty nicely. So, yeah, I'm liking it so far. We're going to need to add some thickness in here as a cleanup pass a little bit later. Let's go ahead and I think this is a good spot to go ahead and call it. So we got the upper part of this shape in place, maybe barring a little bit of tweaking here and there. And I mean, I'll be tweaking stuff kind of as we go along. So this is me just kind of smoothing out some edges that I see immediately. So we'll go ahead and call this, and in the next video we'll take a look at starting the underside of this piece and move along from there. But that will wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot for watching.